I have Scott Nelson, who's one of the co-founders of Joov. Joov is a phenomenal red light technology, really good, lots of cool benefits. I'm really excited to have him on the show today and talk all about things red light and how we can use it to improve your health. Well, Scott, welcome to the show.
Dr. J, pleasure to be on the show. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent, Scott. So first, tell me about your background. How do you even get into a field where you're, hey, I'm going to invent red light technology and bring it to the masses? How does that even work? How do you even get to this point?
Right. Well, I'd like to say it was all planned out and very strategic, but that's not really the case. I personally, I spent most of my professional career in the traditional med tech space. So with companies like
Oh,
Medtronic, Covidien, Boston Scientific, and really more
cool.
specifically the peripheral vascular arena. So I have a really strong med tech background. But the story of how we founded Joov is really probably not too dissimilar to any other startup. This was back in early 2015, and my wife and her sister purchased a red light therapy package from a local spa in Minneapolis. That's where we started the company, and
Cool.
saw really good benefits. But when we looked at the product landscape and the available information online to learn more about this technology, there really wasn't a lot of good offerings. Either way, right? Whether it was to learn in a sort of easily digestible way, more about light therapy or photobiomodulation, or from a product standpoint, there really wasn't, very good offerings for when it comes to devices that you could use at home. And so we kind of thought, there might be something here. There might be an opportunity to kind of like, see if we can build a product that kind of suits our own needs first. And that's a high level overview, but that's sort of how we got started.
Cool. So, like, what is red light? We have obviously it's a spectrum, right? Like,
Mhm.
what's that frequency? How does that compare to like UVB light, where you can make vitamin D, but also get a sunburn? What's that comparison look like?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because light can be kind of one of these abstract things, right? For
Mm-hmm.
people, especially if people are new to it.
Mm-hmm.
When I new to it in terms of how it can affect our health. And so, to your point, you brought up the electromagnetic spectrum. It's actually very, very broad. You've got invisible, infrared wavelengths of light, to visible light that we see, every day, blue, green, red, et
Mm-hmm.
cetera, to UVB, UVA, UVB, et cetera. Various wavelengths. And when we talk about light therapy or photobiomodulation, there's actually a very narrow range of wavelengths that have been proven time and time again in clinical science to support some really strong benefits when it comes to overall health. And those wavelengths kind of generally fall in the red and near infrared range. But to your point, it's almost like the comparison would be like, think about 10 football fields, right? And we're focused on the 10 to 20 yard line on one of those football fields, right? And that's where kind of those specific wavelengths of light, red and near infrared, are sort of like where the magic happens when it comes to health and wellness.
Yeah, and that wavelength, that frequency is right around what 650 to 750 nanometer frequency.
Yeah. At nanometers is typically the metric that's used when talking about wavelengths, and it's visible red light in that kind of that low to mid 600 nanometer
Got
range,
it.
and then near infrared. So not mid or far, not infrared like an infrared sauna, and we can certainly talk about that later on in the conversation. But near infrared in the kind of the low to mid 800 nanometer range, and those are, and not to say that other wavelengths of light can have benefits when it comes to certain health categories. But those two specific ranges have been proven by the most science.
Okay, so on your device, I have a True device. It's phenomenal. And there's two options. There's a red light option, then there's a near infrared light option. So is the difference just the near infrared, just the frequency is a little bit little longer instead of 650 to 750, it's a little bit higher up in the frequency?
It is. It is a little bit longer wavelength, and that's probably the number one question we get all the time is what's the difference between the two, red
Yeah.
versus near infrared. And there's probably some different mechanisms that of action at a cellular level that we'll learn
Hmm.
about over time. But for the most part, it's really just depth of penetration. So most of the energy from red light is absorbed in the superficial layers of our tissue. So primarily the dermis and epidermis of your skin. And then near infrared has the unique ability to penetrate into deeper tissues. And that's why you see it studied more often for, reducing joint pain and inflammation, or for bone health, stimulating, bone regrowth as an example,
So
because it can
near
penetrate
infrared,
deeper.
you have deeper penetration. Infrared, regular red light, it's more superficial.
You got it. You got it.
And then, so let's go over that frequency. So 650 to 750 or so for the red. And then the infrared is what? What's that frequency there?
Yeah, it's about the mid 600s for red, and then the low to mid 800s for near infrared.
Low to mid 800s. Okay, great.
Yep.
So I can wrap my head around that. And just for people listening, um, you kind of go violet, blue, green, 400 to 500. So you keep on creeping up in
Yep.
that spectrum. Those wavelengths get longer as you go into red and infrared. Is that correct?
You got it. You got it. And
Okay, good.
I think the important point to call out here is in the analogy I like to use when we talk about different wavelengths of light is kind of thinking about it like food. We all understand our bodies metabolize different macronutrients in various ways, right? Proteins, carbs, fats. And it matters the time of day, right? That you eat those as well. Like if you eat a high glycemic carbohydrate late at night, not a great recipe for success, for health success anyway. But when it comes to wavelengths of light, those also have unique, our bodies respond uniquely from a physiological standpoint, different wavelengths. You mentioned UVB wavelengths of light as an example. We all understand that our bodies produce vitamin D in response to UVB exposure. Well, the cells, the mitochondria in our cells respond in unique ways to when exposed to red and near infrared light as well. So it's just kind of important to understand our bodies, they react and respond to these different wavelengths of light.
Can infrared or near infrared, can that burn your skin?
No. Not like UV ultraviolet rays from the sun as an example.
Okay, got it. So the ultraviolet rays, that's going to be on the 400-ish frequency. So you got to be in that lower 400, 450 or so to start getting the burn. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's in the kind of the mid 300s. There's a little bit of a range there, like mid to high 300s into the low 400s, and then you start getting into visible blue light as an example.
And what's happening? Like, why is it that wavelength gets longer? It's not having a burning effect. Is there a reason why your body's able to dissipate it or tolerate it better?
That's a great question. Probably a little bit above my pay grade, and
Yeah.
probably more applicable to like a photobiomodulation researcher, but not entirely sure that the mechanism at play there. But I think the
Okay.
important point to remember for people listening is our bodies just respond differently to these various wavelengths of light, just like food. And so ultraviolet wavelengths of light can be beneficial. They can help our bodies produce more vitamin D, but like prolonged
great, yeah.
exposure isn't great because we're likely to burn, and it's likely to cause a skin burn. So
Exactly. Now, some people, they also talk about, vitamin, like the ultraviolet light, that's going to stimulate cortisol. It's going to take down melatonin. That's why we keep lights off at night, so to speak. But tell me about red light on melatonin effects. Like, can you do red light before bed? Will that negate your melatonin and make it harder for you to go to sleep and stimulate you? What do you notice with that?
yeah, when it comes to red light, this is kind of one of the emerging categories within the world of light therapy that is showing some interesting promise, right? Exposure to red and near infrared light, and can it help your body produce more melatonin? There's some early, some small studies. I mean, we're kind of early in learning more about this category, but there are some interesting studies. One in particular that stands out to me while we're chatting here is researchers that evaluated female basketball players that were exposed to full body red light therapy. I think, if I remember correctly, it was a relatively short amount of time, but they saw tremendous results in terms of their sleep quality. And researchers then concluded that it's highly likely that these wavelengths of light are stimulating melatonin production. And so I think that's one of the, and that's, anecdotally, we've heard now from, hundreds of our own customers that have reported back, benefits with regards to enhanced sleep quality when using, red and near infrared light on a consistent basis. And so it appears that, yes, that's definitely happening. And there's no doubt that it's definitely a better wavelength of light to be exposed to once the sun begins to set. Because if we're looking at, I mean, I know you've covered this on your show before, Dr. J, but if we're exposed to bright blue light or bright white light at night, that's very disruptive to our circadian rhythm.
Yes.
It serves as almost a signal to our brain, right? Our brain says, body, you should be wide awake because it's sunny out. It's this bright blue and white light that's stimulating. And so we think our body thinks that it's midday, it's the middle part of the day, when in reality we should begin to prepare for bedtime. And so it's a much more gentle form of light to be used, in the evenings. There's no doubt, but it does appear that there's some therapeutic effect as well in terms of stimulating more melatonin production.